Welcome to SVG-TV News for Tuesday, July 21st, 2015. I'm Lauren Fraser with the details. St. Vincent and the Grenadines is said to have recorded a total of 100 healthcare-associated infections in the year 2014 alone. This was disclosed by Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Health, Wellness and the Environment, Louis Deschamps, while speaking at the opening of a workshop designed to look at healthcare-associated infections and antimicrobial resistance, surveillance of hospital infections, and outbreak investigations. Healthcare infections are infections people acquire while receiving treatment for another condition in a healthcare setting. Permanent Secretary Deschamps explains that the healthcare-associated infections and antimicrobial resistance both constitute a public health problem of increasing magnitude globally.
St. Vincent and the Grenadines, our records indicate that in 2014, we recorded 100 cases of healthcare-associated infections. Antimicrobial resistant pathogens that cause healthcare-associated infections pose an ongoing and increasing challenge to hospitals and other health facilities, both in the clinical treatment of patients and in the prevention of the cross-transmission of these problematic pathogens. Colleagues, antimicrobial resistance is an economic burden on the healthcare system, as resistant infections not only cost more to treat, but also can prolong healthcare use. Unfortunately, colleagues, infections caused by antibiotic-resistant bacteria are an everyday occurrence in healthcare settings.
Deschamps further states that research has suggested many healthcare infections are preventable. He says although healthcare-associated infections and antimicrobial resistance constitute the most frequent adverse events in healthcare, it is also true that the global burden of such remains unknown.
Patients who seek assistance from the healthcare system enter with the assumption that they're going into a safe environment. Unfortunately, sometimes the intensive use of antimicrobials in healthcare establishments and opportunities for transmission among patients and clinical staff often pose important risks to vulnerable populations, including the acquisition of multi-resistant pathogens in life-threatening infections. According to the World Health Organization, it can be estimated that each year, hundreds of millions of patients around the world are affected by healthcare-associated infections, and the burden of healthcare-associated infections is several times higher in low and middle-income countries than in high-income countries.
Local focal point for communicable diseases and immunization, Ferosa Roach, says as medical care becomes more complex and advanced, antimicrobial resistance and healthcare-associated infections are increasing.
We as health professionals are aware that increased nosocomial infections caused by antimicrobial resistant pathogen have impacted on clinical outcomes, that is morbidity, mortality, increased length of hospital stay, and increased health costs. Several studies of nosocomial infections further demonstrates that surveillance of nosocomial infections and antimicrobial and infection control practices can prevent hospital-associated infections. It is therefore necessary and important for us as a ministry to increase the knowledge and build capacity among healthcare professionals in surveillance of healthcare-associated infection and antimicrobial resistance, as this will help us to enact early detection and prevention strategies to avoid and reduce the incidence of these conditions.
Country Program Specialist for the Pan American Health Organization, or PAHO, Anique Wilson, says it is important to note that healthcare providers are also at risk of being infected and affected by healthcare infections. Wilson describes the workshop as timely as it will serve to update health professionals on very important issues.
Now, during the sessions, we are going to be exposed to the information on the associated factors, such as medical devices, contamination of healthcare environments, patient-to-worker transmission, overuse or improper use of antibiotics. The question is, why then are we spending so much time to not only train personnel and also conduct a healthcare assessment? Well, healthcare-associated infections are significant causes of mortality and morbidity. According to WHO, it is said that at any given time, about 1 in every 25 inpatients has an infection related to healthcare. In the US alone, it costs the healthcare system billions of dollars each year and loss of tens of thousands of lives. In St. Vincent and the Grenadines, it's no exception. We heard earlier by the PS where it is documented that we had over 100 healthcare-associated infections.
The workshop, which was held at the Methodist Church Hall, was hosted by the Ministry of Health, Wellness and the Environment in collaboration with PAHO. Opposition leader Arnim Eustace is expressing concern that the monies being spent on the government's Lives to Live program are being used as an election bribe. Eustace made this accusation on the New Democratic Party's New Times radio program on Monday and says he is disappointed by the actions of the government.
A lot of money is being spent in these programs, including the distribution of materials. Including the distribution of materials to persons for purely election purposes. Millions of dollars have been used for that purpose, and I gave 2 examples last week, and I have another 2 this week. And I said last week that about $11 million had already been used or approved to bring in materials in these programs, especially those where you're giving materials to persons for political reasons.
The opposition leader questions why the local private sector is not able to get some of the purchases of materials being distributed. He highlighted that the government owes several of the local businesses that sell building materials, and because of financial constraints, some are letting go staff because of their inability to pay salaries.
That I'm disappointed. I think it is wrong that we should buy all the materials from a single firm in Jamaica, when the private sector in St. Vincent and the Grenadines is in a poor condition, laying off staff very often. And here you have an injection at that time of nearly $11 million. And none of it was going to our local private sector, but that the government also owed the private sector. And their first duty should have been to give the private sector that action, not a piece of it. It should have been bought all from the private sector. And they would have some clout with that, the government, because they will say, I can get it another place cheaper. So you give me the same prices and I'll give you the business.
And Eustace says the borrowing of monies from the Petro-Carib program is another major concern to him and his party. Eustace is of the view that the debt from that initiative has influenced the country's financial debt and called for the spending of Petro-Carib funds to be reflected in the public accounts.
We are borrowing from Petro-Carib and we have to pay back Petro-Carib. We have to pay it back. And we kept saying all the time that that is a problem which impacts on our debt. And I said last week, I believe that is part of the problem while we were listed among the 22 countries caught in this debt trap. When other islands, right or wrong, were not so listed. I am satisfied in my mind that Petro-Carib has a lot to do with that and how we use Petro-Carib. But we don't want to give the information to the public. And when you speak about it, they say you're confused. I ain't confused by one thing.
The former fiscal advisor said under an NDP government he will establish a public financing and debt committee which will look into the fiscal standing of the country.
I want to know, and I want to see it reflected in the public accounts of St. Vincent and the Grenadines in a proper manner. And that's one of the reasons, why you see we have announced, for us, months of operation, we're going to have a committee on public financing and debt. I want to be able to, in a new administration, upfront, to know exactly the financial state of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Then the truth will be known.
Outlining the inconveniences of establishing a geothermal plant here, Chief Operating Officer of Reykjavik Geothermal Limited, Gunnarsson, says that loud drilling and some dust may disturb the area, but the overall benefit of having clean energy is long-term. Gunnarsson made mention of Dominica, which is also exploring geothermal energy. He said the project there has not been affected by weather and will be a long-lasting venture. Drilling work will soon begin on the 10 to 15 megawatt geothermal energy plant, which will be located at the La Soufrière volcano.
It is running continuously. You don't have to stop it. Geothermal power plant, they want to run all the time. They don't depend on rain, or sun, or wind. It's coming deep down in the earth, and that doesn't interfere with the climate or such things. So they tend to run smoothly. They want to have, it's a baseload power that they are creating. So they want to run. I'm talking a little bit like an engineer. These machines, they want to be in full operation all the time. That's how they are best.
The geothermal project for SVG is a collaborative effort of the Clinton Climate Initiative, Emmerich Caribbean Incorporated, Reykjavik Geothermal Limited, and the government of SVG. The agreement to carry out the work was signed in May of 2014. The plant is expected to become operational after 2018, carrying a cost of $82 million. This country's Chief Magistrate, Duration Brown Matthias, is of the view that too much alcohol is being consumed in this country, resulting in many persons getting into trouble. She expressed this view on Monday, July 20th this year, when a 60-year-old male appeared before her on charge of drug possession. The male did not waste the court's time when he entered a plea of guilty and stated that someone gave him a bag to take to someone else, but at the time he was intoxicated. Having heard the defendant's explanation, Brown Matthias reprimanded and discharged him for the offense. While doing so, she stated that some members of the local constabulary consumed too much alcohol, and further went on to state that the police canteen should stop selling alcohol. With the legalization of same-sex marriages in the U.S., does this clear the way for automatic acceptance of the practice by the people of SVG? This was the topic that was discussed on last Sunday's Hits Talk program. Panelist Pastor Fillmore Isaac says that he is concerned about the level of tolerance of Vincentians to properly discuss the issue without verbal attacks.
I am concerned about the level of intolerance for free expressions and opinions in our society. I also am concerned about the unwillingness to debate issues freely, concerned about the haste at which we arrive at conclusions based on just gut feelings, and it seems as if our society is so preoccupied and noisy that we don't take time for reflection.
Barrister at law Mandela Campbell says that as an independent nation, St. Vincent and the Grenadines must not simply observe countries like America and copy their practices. She added that in a situation like this, the decision to begin discussions to change SVG's anti-buggery laws must be of the people and not based on outside influences.
In analyzing this topic, you look at you would have mentioned the U.S. Supreme Court has made same-sex marriages legal there. I don't think this is a correct premise for us having this discussion in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, because as an independent nation, we ought not to just look at other nations and see what they're doing to accept their practices. We have to look at what is our culture, what are the traditions that we want to promote. If the U.S. Supreme Court had legalized something else, if they legalize discrimination against blacks going back to where they were at one point in time, would that be a premise for us to have a discussion on whether, you know, we should discriminate blacks? So we, that's one of the errors that I find we make in St. Vincent and the Grenadines and the Caribbean. We follow suit with whatever the U.S. does.
And according to Campbell, Vincentians must not confuse human rights with freedom of choice. She says that persons refer to homosexuality as a human right. However, this is not something that should be said loosely, since according to international laws, this is not a basic human right.
When we're talking about rights, we cannot speak about rights loosely, because that is what was done in the U.S. and what's done in other nations around the world. You're talking about gay rights, this rights, and all these other rights. But these so-called sexual rights, they're not a part of customary international law. The fundamental rights and freedoms as we know it, you know, right to freedom of religion, right to freedom of speech, all of these rights are fundamental rights and freedoms. But certain groups and lobbyists have been promoting other so-called sexual rights, and because of repetition, you know, people have just, you know, gone on to that bandwagon and said, oh, you know, in support of these so-called rights. So we have to be careful when we use certain terms, even terms such as sexual orientation.
In direct relation to that story, Campbell says though she believes no one should have to suffer in any way, emotionally or physically, because of their sexual orientation, she sees no purpose in labeling Christians as intolerant on the subject matter. She says as a devout Christian, she's of the view that everyone holds dear a certain belief and that no one should have to change their ideals for someone else's.
If I disapprove of your way of life, it could be homosexuality, it could be sexual promiscuity, you know, it could be a range of things. If I disapprove of it, why are you calling me intolerant? My view is that
I am not.
No, I'm not saying that you're calling me intolerant, but why would should people call me intolerant if I disapprove of a way of life? Somebody may disapprove of me as a Christian. That doesn't mean that I am to go around calling them intolerant like that. My view is that as a Christian, you ought to love that person because God, Jesus, I believe Jesus died for that person, you know, to set them free. And while I do not promote hating homosexuals at all, I do not promote about when people say, oh, burn fire on them or ostracize them or anything. These are people who you need to reach out, who you need to touch, who you need to love. In reaching out to them, I cannot tell them, oh, what you are doing is okay because of my religious beliefs. My loving you is telling you what is truth as well, and I don't want people to say because I tell you what to me is truth, what I believe is truth, that I am being intolerant. And I think that is something that needs to be cleared up.
This week, Vincentians are being told to expect a life-changing message as Christian Life Ministries of God's Battalion of Prayer Ministries International host their fellowship's 8th biannual convocation. The convocation is expected to take place at the Caliqua Playing Field and at the Christian Life Ministry Church at Glen. Bishop of God's Battalion of Prayer Ministries International USA, Alfred Cockfield, says that this event is aimed at uplifting and reviving the people and communities of SVG. He says the convocation, which begins on Thursday 23rd through Sunday July 26th, has a message for everyone.
And so we're believing God for a great time where the people of St. Vincent could join together. It does not matter what denomination you are with, just come on out and let's worship and exalt the Lord Jesus Christ. And so that the people, when you come, invite your neighbor, especially if your neighbor is not yet a Christian, invite them to come. As we worship God together and the presence of God descend upon that play field, they will be touched by the presence of God. They will want to serve God. And the more people of a nation begin to serve God is the less of other things, negative things that will happen within a nation.
One of the guest speakers at the event, evangelist Kenrick Corbin of Faith Miracle Ministries, Inc., Guyana, South America, says that Vincentians who are looking for healing and a place to worship can attend the event. He added that this is a time for change and everyone has the opportunity to do so.
All Christians, regardless of what church you go to, this is a kingdom event. Christian Life Ministries just happen to be the host. But in fact, this is part of God's agenda for St. Vincent, and we are inviting you. We are privileged to have the opportunity to facilitate this event. So we're inviting all churches, all Christians, all Christian organizations, other secular organizations, youth organizations, women organizations, clubs, whatever social grouping you belong to. We're inviting Rastafarians, we're inviting everybody. Come and let's see what God is going to do for you. Remember, this is a Kairos moment, and the Kairos moment come not every day. It is a rare occurrence, so we're inviting you to be part of this meeting with destiny.
David Quinty, a 56-year-old water taxi operator from Christchurch, Barbados, has been arrested and charged for breaching the immigration laws here. Quinty is accused for entering the state by boat on May 8, 2015 at Union Island without the permission of the Immigration Authority. He appeared on Tuesday, July 21st this year at the Serious Offences Court before Magistrate Rachel Brown Matthias and pleaded guilty to the charge. Reports are that on July 18th this year, police at the Narcotics Division, based on certain information received, went to a house at Fountain where Quinty was staying and executed a search warrant, but nothing illegal was found. However, owed to his account, he was questioned of his nationality, to which he replied Barbadian. He was immediately taken into custody and handed over to the Immigration Authority, resulting in the charges. He was fined $500 to be paid forthwith or face a 3-month jail term. He was also ordered to be deported out of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Quinty is said to have entered this country before and was deported in 2009. He also attempted to re-enter again in 2012 but was denied entry.